You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where this week we will be taking a look back at the Test series that just was between India and England. England, of course, ended up on the end of a 3-1 battering, but there was a little bit more to it. There's a few stories and we'll be getting to the bottom of all of those. Then in part 2 of the show, we'll be looking forward to the 5-match T20 series between the two same teams. I'm Jack Hope, and as usual, I'm joined by Ross Legg. How are you doing, Ross, in your DC United shirt?
Yeah, marvellous, thank you. I'm ready to go. If there was football to happen or cricket to happen right now, I'm dressed and ready.
And Max Rowe Brown, how are you doing, Max Rowe Brown?
Yeah, very good. Glad we've got the thumpings out of the way, and now we can look forward to some brighter pastures.
Yeah, thanks for the happy birthday wishes, boys, by the way. Just gonna.
Is it your birthday? Oh, good. Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Why are you podcasting on your birthday?
Well, there's nothing else to do, is there?
That's love for your listeners. That's what it is. That is beautiful to see.
Happy birthday, Jack!
Cheers, lads. You know, to kick off the show with our traditional first question of the week, I've taken a little bit of inspiration from the actual news. Now, going into this India v England series, we thought that was big. But tonight on Channel 3 in the UK, something properly big is going to go down. I'm, of course, referring to Oprah Winfrey's interview of Harry and Meghan. So with that in mind, and with a cricket twist, Ross, in a test series between Team Harry and Meghan and Team Queen, who do you think would win?
Well, one, I'm not a massive fan of the Royals, so this question to me is a bit like, I don't know why I'm asking it. And I can't imagine how many people listening to us actually like the Royals either. But I reckon Team Queen is going to win. And I think it's because she's shown longevity. She has shown that she can go through a really difficult innings, but she can last a long time. I reckon her nickname would be the Wall. I think she's good in that regard, and I reckon she can weather a storm of hostile bowling. Bowling wise, I also think her team would be full of those old bloke Sunday League grenades that you get. So literally they come up and delivering them on the spot all the time. A young Harry and Meghan Markle.
Have they got a batting lineup full of Ross Legs?
Yeah, they're getting out every single time to that kind of stuff. They're definitely going to ravage the keen younger team, I think.
That's a good answer, Ross. I like that. I do think, Prince Charles probably can bowl something approaching an off break, which I imagine would worry someone like Meghan Markle with her, I assume, primarily baseball style approach to the sport of cricket. Max, same question to you. Are you Team Queen or Team Harry and Meghan?
I also believe Team Queen would win this particular matchup, but for slightly different reasons. So, Team Queen is basically, they have the power. They've been the institution for the last 50 years. They're, I think they're like the core members of the ICC. They hold all the cards. And Harry and Meghan, they're like the new guys on the block. They're new to the game. Basically, it's like India playing away, Ireland playing away in India on really heavily turning pitches. And it would just be an absolute mauling.
That's it's interesting that you managed to bring Ireland into a question about the Queen, but we'll let that slide through to the keeper. I have gone. It's a hat trick of Team Queen.
It's really. I thought you were going to be. I thought you would be for the progressive cricket fan there, going no, new format, change of location.
Well, maybe in a new format, I can see Team Harry and Meghan doing something. But in a test match, no. From a fundamental starting point here, you've got the issue of player numbers. So Team Queen has got like a whole household staff to draw upon. She's definitely going to be able to field 11. Team Harry and Meghan, that's only 2 people, which is a problem. I also think the Queen, is a bit of a street fighter. Okay. I think the Queen would be also, she'd be happy to get one of her lackeys to like file one side of the ball, or
So take the kind of Commonwealth approach of the Australians and kind of go, do you know what? That was a tactic born of British ingenuity.
Yeah. And the final point, of course, is that the press are all on the Queen's side, which means Team Harry and Meghan are just going to get. I mean, like the British press when it comes to sport, and we might talk about it with reference to the actual England side here. They're not necessarily the kindest people. You add Harry and Meghan into that mix, and there's going to be some serious vitriol, and I don't think anyone would be really up to it.
There we go.
Hat trick for Team Queen. Ross, any messages for the listeners?
If you're still listening, you should like and subscribe on our YouTube channel and follow us at The Cricket Pod on Instagram and Twitter and any podcast platform that you are listening to us on.
That's a good message. Let's take a quick break and then we will come back with a recap of the Test series. Yeah, so the Test series then, it started with one of the all-time highs, or one of the recent highs for English cricket, with that victory in Chennai. And then it ended with 74 consecutive partnerships of 50 or fewer. In fact, no, fewer than 50. It would be a pretty short and pretty steep roller coaster, wouldn't it?
What's that one? Is it Nemesis, the one at Alton Towers, where you just go up to the top and then just drop vertically?
I know exactly the one you mean. I don't think it's that, but it's. I think there's a Superman one like that in America. We all know what we've got in mind here. Like England, I think they'll probably be a bit disappointed to have sunk the way they did. India will no doubt be thrilled that they took that series 3-1 and really fought back in the final three tests. Ross, what did we learn from this series?
So I think there's a lot of negativity around the tour, and I think if you look back, and before we were predicting there was going to be like a 4-0 whitewash, England were going to be kind of battered every single game. Do you think that possibly England actually overachieved in this Test series?
So, right. So I thought about this, and I looked at this question from the point of view of who will be happier. And I think England, as you say, Ross, had they been offered 3-1 prior to the series, they might actually have taken that, considering particularly India's dominance at home. And I think on the flip side, I think Virat Kohli would have been upset to hear that his team were about to lose a test. And so the thing is, though, that the conclusion of the series with the absolute hammering that England took in the final three matches, I'm not so sure now whether England will think that they have overachieved. And on the flip side again, I think at this point, Virat Kohli is probably pretty happy with how his side played in the final three matches of the series. So whilst I do think that England winning a test in India is a great achievement, the fact that they got beaten so horrifically in the next three matches basically takes away anything positive that you could have moved forward with from that win in Chennai.
Yeah, I think when England fans are celebrating, ironically, that we've gone past 200 runs, it's kind of a bit of a show on that one. Max, I'll come to you first with a proper question. So the winter tours have seen England's leadership both admired for some of the rotation policy and valuing mental health of their players, etc., and chastised by the very same people who are saying this is good for cricket. Strategically, what do you think England could have done better?
Well, it's firstly, it's amazing, isn't it, how results can just change the landscape of what people have to say about the same thing. It's a classic example of rewriting the narrative, but that's what happens in English media. To answer your actual question, I think, to be honest, from my point of view, the rotation policy was probably the right thing to do. I think it's the selection where it all went wrong. And we were in this sort of weird cycle where it looked like England were picking the team for the previous test. or just second guessing themselves. Once we got it so horribly wrong in that spinning track at Ahmedabad with the pink ball, they kind of lost the plot, didn't they? And tried to second guess what India were doing. And I think the sensible thing would be to look at who your players are, who you think your best team is, and stick to the basics and go with it. It worked in the first test. It all went wrong in the second test, but then it just the thinking got muddled, and we were guilty of it too. We were saying, "Oh yeah, just go for it. Like, it's your best shot of winning the test." But actually, what we'd seen is two games. One game where England won comfortably, and one game where they lost badly.
And we're also 5,000 miles away. Chris Silverwood and Joe Root could literally go out and go,
they are actually
that's
there.
probably going to turn that pitch, isn't it?
Yeah. So we fell for the same trick, but I think just a little bit more level-headedness would have gone a long way.
Yeah, I think any PR or communication firms out there have also got a pretty easy pitch to the ECB. Jack, what about you? What do you think on that front?
Right. So my general view on England's leadership and kind of, in a sense, the way England played on this tour is that we're really talking about margins of victory in the final three tests. I think had every single pitch been like the first one in Chennai, i.e. a road for like 4.5 or 4 days.
Not,
I mean, it's only
not a great pitch in itself.
No, then I think England would have had a chance to maybe draw that series 2-2. And I think it would have been like a straight bat off. And I think in a straight bat off, this India side didn't perform the way we sort of thought they would with the bat. On the pitches that we did play on, though, this England team was just not equipped to deal with the ability of Ravichandran Ashwin and the ability of Axar Patel, and there's not really a way you can strategize your way out of that fundamental skill difference.
Mm-hmm. So I think what England did do well, so we kind of talk about all the time what England do wrong, but actually what they did do well was that I thought they looked like they had a bowling plan. For when they picked the right bowlers, they looked like they were bowling to a plan. And actually it worked, right? The India top order didn't actually fire compared to Rohit. They clearly had an approach. They just didn't seem to have enough runs to play with to actually make it competitive.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think if you look at who came out of this series with like positive marks from an England perspective, really it's sort of Joe Root and Jack Leach and like Joe Root.
I would throw Jimmy Anderson in there as well.
Oh yeah, I know you probably get Anderson in there as well. But I mean, I don't know if Anderson has come out. I already thought Anderson was good. Did I think that Leach would take 18 wickets across the series at like under 30? If you look at how other bowlers from visiting teams have done in India, no, I didn't think that. Did I think that Root would continue his form with the bat? Yeah, maybe. Did I think he'd be the threat he was with the ball? No, I didn't. And
Absolutely,
yes.
I
think you have to give credit to both of those players there. And I think you're right, Ross. Like England generally, speaking with the ball in hand, were not too bad. Aside from when they had to bowl at Rohit, and aside from when the wheels really fell off in that last test and they ran out of bowlers. But the batting, like this, it's you can't get round the issue that not really any of these players have the game to score with anything like a low level of risk against Ashwin and Axar.
Mm-hmm. And what I thought as well, when it comes to tactically, they obviously managed the youngsters relatively poorly, I thought, from the England front. We talked about it on the Daily Show with their management of Ollie Pope. Don Best was clearly kind of just hung out to dry. But if you look at most of the England teams, of Sibley, Crawley, Burns, Ollie Stone, like even Jofra Archer to a certain extent, they're all inexperienced test cricketers, and it kind of it showed actually quite a lot throughout the whole series.
Yeah, in a sense though, like you can't wish someone more experienced. That isn't something. So you do have to go through these processes. I think it's a talent issue, like overall though. Okay. I like Dan Weston on our last show sort of talked a little bit about whether England had selected the right players or picking the right team or properly evaluating players in terms of what they can contribute with bat and ball. I think there's something in that. I think there are broader issues in terms of things like the selection of Bairstow. Let's just put a name on it. Like what do you think you're going to get out of Johnny Bairstow? And so that from an England perspective, I think that's sort of where things are disappointing. You can't really blame Crawley or Sibley or Pope even for their batting failure in those conditions, because they haven't really ever played there. There's questions around like whether they should have or whether they should have been exposed in the way that they were. And I'm thinking particularly around Pope here, coming back from an injury to be put in the team and then not taken out of the team when it looked like he was basically an hors d'oeuvre.
No, that's a classic England kind of tough love kind of approach.
Yeah. So I think that's where some of the strategic stuff comes in. But like again, I'll go back to the point.
What are the other options though? That's what you have to think about. Like the young players were in a tough position and very inexperienced, but like you said, Johnny Bairstow was perhaps the experienced head that England plumped for to try and answer that question because he can supposedly play spin.
But he shouldn't have been is the point, I think. I mean, like that's why he shouldn't have been in the team. I think sort of beyond that, it's some of the ways England tried to construct a coherent test team with the players they had available didn't really make sense either. Like playing 8 batters who averaged 10. Playing 4 batters who averaged 10 in that day-night test.
Yeah,
it was that the greatest idea when you know the top 7 isn't like an elite top 7. Would you?
And then winning the toss and then bowling. Like, what are you thinking about?
There's some things like that in the final test. Again, like why have you got a specialist batsman batting at 7 and not enough bowling? Like why have you only got one seamer? I think it's questions around that I think would have affected the margin of defeat. But like, yeah, I don't think you can rotate or strategize or think your way out of the reality that is these batters in these conditions are not good enough against Ashwin and Axar.
Yeah.
That's completely fair enough. So Max, so the way of solving this falls on your shoulders, I think.
Oh, excellent. How much am I getting paid for this?
So England need to be slightly better with the bat against the spinning ball. Just slightly better. Any ideas how England can actually improve?
I've got a couple of ideas. I think one of them we may have discussed very briefly. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, just knocking my microphone all over the place. One we might have discussed briefly in a previous show, which was around the sort of A-team setup and getting sort of some more tours in the subcontinent for players who, that in the England Lions team that we think might be the future of English cricket, and actually exposing them to those conditions, and not maybe don't even have home tours. What's the point in having a home tour against those teams? And just concentrating on getting whatever you can out of games in India and Australia, and perhaps the West Indies as well, if they return to the force of Test cricket that they once were. And the other thing was, it's just sort of a side note of something a video I saw from, I think it was from a few years ago, where Australia had put in some synthetic pitch at their national training academy, which was intended to mimic spinning pitches in the subcontinent, and they had a little chat with Nathan Lyon, and he was talking about how it sort of was kind of like a 3rd, 4th day pitch in India, and getting people practicing on that, because obviously when you're in the nets at home, it's if it's an indoor net, it's not really going to be representative of most forms of cricket you're going to play. So that's the kind of perhaps innovation that we should be looking to, which might give people a bit more experience. Obviously, you can't recreate playing on those pitches against Ashwin just by building a fake pitch in somewhere fancy, but you know, it's a step, and it's the kind of thing that might give people a little bit more experience, because, you know, we saw people, Jack Leach bowled well on those Indian pitches, and we've, you know, had pretty good spinners in the past, so there's nothing to say that it wouldn't be a good sort of grounding for people in the absence of getting them on a Lions tour.
I think if you want to look at the batting side of things, so again, to go back to Dan's point from the last show, probably like pick batters who have like a strong proven track record in the county championship. Because
is that against everything, Jack, though, or is it against specialists? So actually,
but no. So I don't think so. Again, I've talked about this before. I think you pick the better cricketer because the better cricketer got good at cricket by adapting to things. And they probably got a thought process or like a rough game plan that means that they are able to improve, and that is something that you have to do when you step up to test level, because it is harder. Now, when you pick someone to play in your test team, what you want is them to have the best possible chance of making that step up and making those improvements. So you want to pick people who have proven themselves at the lower level. And I think Dan made some pretty good points about England maybe not doing that. So look at some other players. I talked to Dan after the show because a couple of people were like, well, who would you specifically talk about? And Dan said, well, basically, England should be pretty much always be picking Wokes because the top 7 is pretty weak, and you having that batting option a little bit lower down the order is really useful. And he also says someone like Sam Northeast consistently produces at the lower level. Why has he not been picked whilst England are effectively taking punts on other players? So you need to do that. I think there are 2 other things that I'd speculate might be a problem. One is where the modern day English batter comes from, and that, generally speaking, is the private school system in the UK.
I was going to say Whitgift.
Yeah. Well, and now that is a system which is able to produce good cricketers, players who are capable of playing first-class cricket and have a game that probably looks quite orthodox, and probably will lead to them generating runs in the right conditions. What I sort of wonder, though, is like, what is your exposure? If that's the route you come up in cricket, what is your exposure to any wickets which are not good? Versus somebody who maybe comes up through club cricket in the UK, where you do play on wickets that are not good, and you do have to work out how you might score runs in those situations, because we're talking like the wickets that are produced at some private schools would be test standard, basically. Like they have full-time groundsmen with like I know one of these guys who is a full-time groundsman. They have a weather radar at his school so that they know, like, when the rain.
Can we get a game there?
It's preposterous. And so I do sort of wonder, like, maybe England need to be a little bit more innovative in terms of where the pathways into the professional game or how they are built, so that you get batters with slightly different experiences, and you're recruiting from like a wider body of people instead of this very linear, very kind of carbon copy approach to producing batters that we have at the moment. Now, if you look at the bowlers, that is my understanding is that Leach is effectively went to a comprehensive school, and Anderson went to a comprehensive school, and they have slightly unusual ways of going about things from an English perspective, and those I don't know, slightly rarer skills or slightly self-developed skills can be enormously effective in a professional environment where everyone is taught to do it a certain way. That's quite a long-winded approach, and it's probably fairly speculative, to be quite honest. But maybe that's where England need to look if you actually are serious about playing, or if you are serious about competing with India, because you can't recruit from 4% of your population. It's mental. I mean, it doesn't. You can
if your population is over 1 billion.
Well, no, but in India, that's not. There are players in that India team there are some who come from quite wealthy backgrounds. I think Ashwin would be one, and there are players, and we talked about Mohammad Siraj on our previous show who don't. In the Australia series, who talked about his background, who don't, and that that is going to have an impact on the kind of cricketers that make it a professional and probably the relative talent level of those people. The final thing I'd say is that if England go and play on test pitches like the second and third, like they did for the second and third test, it's really unlikely they will ever win, because those conditions were so extreme to an English batter that it's just unrealistic for them to ever have the experience to compete with batters who do have experience on those wickets, and also some of the best players in you get what I mean, and some of the best bowlers.
Yeah, because we saw it last time we went and we won there, right? In terms of we had some of the best, probably had the best England team of all time, kind of with some of the best players of spin in that team, as well as two of England's best ever spin bowlers lined up. If you're coming up against Monty Panesar and Graham Swan in their pump, compared to Leach and Best, no disrespect to Leach and Best, it's a different ball game. So let's talk about India. So they have proved rather handy in their own conditions, with great bowling depth, considerable bowling depth. But batting wise, their top order didn't fire quite as expected. But besides Rohit Sharma. Max, is that a cause for concern and potentially an area of change ahead of their summer in England?
I think I wouldn't necessarily say it's a concern yet. It's definitely worth keeping an eye on. But what we've seen, that there's some of the people in that side who underperformed. I'm thinking Pujara and to a certain extent Kohli, who didn't do that well. We've seen them before do very, very well in England. And which is obviously where they're going next. So I wouldn't be hitting the panic button quite yet about the Indian top order. And I think the English bowling lineup did pretty well. Like you said, they bowled the plans, and that helped kind of keep that Indian top order at bay. Rohit Sharma aside, but I don't think it's any time to be like switching things around. Moving things around. Obviously, there are questions about Rahane. Some people have suggested that maybe he could drop out because he's not had a brilliant series. But then again, not so long ago, we were talking about how well he did in Australia. So, when you've just won a series 3-1 and you've won it comprehensively, there's no reason to go around making changes like that. And I think, especially bearing in mind the kind of players that are in that Indian top order and the caliber that they have and the experience they have and what we know about them, I would not be concerned about them in their next few games at all. And on top of that, you're brought in people like Washington Sundar, lower in the order, who has turned out, it's the start of his batting career in tests has been phenomenal, really. I mean, obviously he was brought in as an extra bowler, but by all accounts, he looks like he could play as a batsman. So, if anything, you could argue that there are good signs ahead.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Go on, Jack.
Well, I was going to say, I sort of double down on what Max said. I think some of so I don't think India underperformed that seriously with the bat on because you were playing. I mean, we played on wickets where one test was over in 2 days. One test was over well within 3 days. One test, I think, just made it into the 4th day, and that tells you that these aren't roads. Like your runs are going to be pretty hard to earn on pitches where test matches end that quickly, and so. Like some of their scores, they're not 500 or something like that. But if you're putting up 250 or even 200, you've actually performed quite well. So they'd like to have.
The weighted average is higher.
The weighted average is higher, exactly.
Well, everyone knows the only people you can possibly blame for Pujara's bad run of form is CSK for picking him up and muddying his brain. What I am going to start to get used to is that Kohli's expressions when he gets out, he's always surprised that you could possibly be out. Kohli, you've been out for so many times in the last 12 months, mate. You're going to have to kind of get used to that, I think. Anyway, the Indian selectors have got themselves quite the selection headache on the bowling front. Max, spin-wise, they've got a choice of Sundar, Axar, Jadeja and Ashwin. Kuldeep Yadav if they fancy it. Nadeem if they fancy a bit of a joke selection. Say in England they decide to pick 2 because of the batting and how good they are at bowling. Is Jadeja get back into the side, or has Sundar and Axar done enough?
For me, Jadeja, I would say, would have to come in just because he's so much more experienced and an all-round quality player. And obviously bowls left arm finger spin, and they're playing England. Axar, I can see Axar becoming a sort of the kind of bowler who plays for India in India and does really well and doesn't play much overseas, like almost like Chris Wokes from an England point of view is turning into, because I think it's just that the speed that he bowls at and the way that either the ball gripping and turning or going on is so much can be so devastating in on Indian pitches. Whereas bowling like that on an English pitch, you might not get that raging turning delivery that puts that doubt in the batsman's mind. So that's that's where I would stand on Axar versus Jadeja. I would be going for Jadeja, but Washington Sundar does, I think, throw up a question if you wanted to bolster the batting. I mean, Jadeja is an excellent batsman, but in sort of future tours, he would be worth thinking at. But while Ashwin is still around as the off-spin option, there's no point in picking 2 off-spinners.
Ashwin will play to like he's 60. He'll torment everyone till he's like
I mean,
60.
he certainly could. I've seen no evidence that his particular style of cricket would be hugely hugely hampered by being 60.
Jack, in terms of the pace bowling front, they've got another battery of different selection options. Bumrah, Shami, Ishant, Umesh, Siraj, Natarajan even, Thakur, Saini and Hardik Pandya. I mean, that's a pretty good set of bowlers to have at your disposal. Who do you think is kind of at the top of the queue there, or the front of the queue?
Well, I mean, I think Bumrah is maybe the best fast bowler in the world, so he's number 1. And then Ishant Sharma. I don't really see why you'd move away from Ishant Sharma. He didn't bowl an awful lot in this series because
he didn't need to
of the surfaces, yeah. But I think while he is still young enough and still fit enough to play, then obviously those 2 come next. What I will say is that every time you see Siraj bowl, or every time I see Siraj bowl, I'm more impressed.
He looks aces, doesn't he?
In Test cricket, so it's possible that he'll muscle his way in as the kind of second seamer after Bumrah, but maybe not quite there yet. I don't know, if you've not been paying attention, India have got lots of depth. They're pretty good. It seems there's like a whole branch or a whole sector within cricket of people who seem to make a living by pointing out really obvious stuff in kind of a creative way. Axar Patel's good, or Rohit Sharma's really good in India was the one that I saw this week, and it was like, like we've actually all seen that.
It's a really hot take.
Yeah, I think like asking some of these questions, it's another one. It's like you could basically pick any of these guys, and they probably do the job. I mean, we saw that happen in Australia. And then obviously Jadeja hasn't been around for this series, and people maybe thought that would make a difference, but they found someone possibly even more lethal, at least against England. So I don't know. I think India will be good for a while yet, won't they?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to burn out anytime soon.
Perhaps we'll be sitting here in not too long discussing the BCCI's rotation policy and whether that's acceptable.
I reckon India could probably field 2 teams that would be in the top 5 Test teams in the world at the moment. They might struggle a little bit on the batting front there.
It'd be entertaining, though, wouldn't it? You could imagine some of the people they'd pick out to put in that team, and we'll come on to those in the T20 preview. So let's. We've talked about England. We've talked about India. There is some lessons to be learnt from this Test series for the BCCI and the ICC that we should quickly cover. And this will no doubt go down brilliantly in the YouTube comments. But if there has to be neutral umpires, then consistency and transparency of process is required. Is that fair, Max?
Do you mean not neutral umpires?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yes,
Home
exactly what I mean.
umpires.
Yeah, well, partisan biased umpires. I mean, no, non-neutral umpires. There needs to be consistency and transparency of process. That's fair enough, isn't it?
It's fair enough. I don't think perhaps you don't even need to mention the nationality of the umpire in that point. I just think
No, I
generally
completely
it's
agree.
better to have a very, very clear process of what's supposed to be done, especially when everyone can hear. Like, it's still relatively novel as a thing, DRS and all that. And when you can hear everything the umpire says, and you can see for yourself the replay and that it's not being done properly, then it gets like a whole lot worse. It's one thing seeing an umpire give a decision and go, well, that looks like a bit of a dodgy decision, and they show it on the replay, and you're like, well, yeah, that was a poor decision. But it's tough. Yeah, you're doing it in real time. It's a tough gig. When when you have all the tools in front of you to get it right, and you don't get it right, that's where questions come asked. And I won't bring football into it, but because I don't need to. But it's that kind of farce at times. So just in general, make sure everyone who does it is properly trained and knows what they're doing.
And Jack, in terms of using the pink ball, so the day-night test I think is a good idea. You're trying to get more crowds in, etc. But if you're going to use the pink ball, you should at least use the minimum requirements by the old specifications, shouldn't you, in terms of the pitches that are going to be used?
The grass length.
Oh,
that depends on whether you're India and you really want to win, because this sort of goes back to the point about England's batters never being able to go to these conditions and winning. In a word, yes, you are exactly what you said is right, and there you go. We've been into the pitches for on like 3 or 4 other episodes.
But people love it. People love it.
No,
Okay.
we don't like what is left to say. Like I would like
we've been through it all, haven't we?
I thought so. Just on that though, I thought the pitch for the third test was fantastic. It brought everyone into the game.
You mean the fourth test?
The fourth test, yeah. It eventually exposed England's strategic errors and it provided a platform for Rishabh Pant and Washington Sundar to take the game away from England at the moment, or when the game was at the most critical moment in the game. It meant that fast bowlers could take wickets. It meant the spinners could take wickets. I thought that was the perfect pitch. I just wish all the matches had been played on it, because the cricket, particularly on day 2, was so good in that test, and we just didn't really get that in test 2 and 3, and even test 1. It was a bit too easy to bat in test 1, and test 2 and 3 it was way too hard to bat.
India were going to win. India were going to win anyway. Anyway, they have secured their place in the World Test Championship final, where they'll be playing at Southampton at the Hampshire Rose Bowl, or whatever the sponsor has taken over the naming rights.
Is it still the Aegeus Bowl?
The Aegeus Bowl. There we go, Max. Review of the predictions then. Jack, you went with 4-0. Max, I believe you went with 3-1 to India.
Did.
And I went with 2-1. So my hot streak is over. And Max, you are now the reigning champ of predictions.
Oh, thank you very much.
I'm not going to go through who we thought was going to be best wicket taker, because it was obviously all of us said Ashwin. And lo and behold, it was Ashwin.
I think I said Axar as a kind of joke.
The
fact that I was nearly right is a little concerning for England as batsmen.
So let's go to player of the series, because could quite possibly be either of those people. So for me, it just has to be Ashwin. I think I've waxed lyrical about him nearly every single podcast we've done recently, just the mastery of that bloke. And the fact that he then got a century to prove Jack wrong around he's shit with the bat was excellent. Jack, who was your player of the series?
So I think probably Rohit Sharma.
Okay.
So he scored 345 runs across the series. Not quite as many as Joe Root, but he did bat 2 fewer times. I think in the second test, his 160 basically automatically won the game for India by T on day 1. In the third test, he scored some key runs. And then in the fourth test, what did he get? 49 off about 150 balls. And basically what he did was tire Anderson and Stokes out, so that they couldn't really bowl anymore. And he set up, or he created the conditions for Rishabh Pant to come in a little bit later on. So, look, I mean, Ashwin, what did he take? 30 wickets and scored a century. I think that's the first time anyone's ever done that. Axar, 27 wickets in 3 tests. Yeah, that's pretty good. But in a series where batting was really hard, I'm going to go with a batter who conquered the conditions and say Sharma.
Brilliant. Max?
Yeah, that's fair enough. I was trying to think of someone to say that's not Ashwin, just because I wanted to be a bit different. But now now Jack's done it, I'm going to say Ashwin. I can't look past the all-round performance. Really, he just showed us why he is the master.
He was the official winner as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, let's go to a moment of the series, which is a little bit more personal. My moment of the series has to be Pant reverse scooping Jimmy Anderson over the slips. Like, that was just, I'd never seen anything like that before, and just the brazenness of it was incredible. And long live Rishabh Pant, who's definitely cemented his place in that Test team for the foreseeable future. Jack?
So I have 3. I won't go into them in detail. Root being hit in the nuts by Kohli in the last Test was really funny. Anderson's magic over way back in Test 1 with the big reverse swing in swingers. Great cricket. And Kohli being bold and not walking was peak Kohli, really. So that's what I enjoyed.
Max?
Mine has to go to the newly dubbed Johnny Bairstow for arriving at the crease, being given out first ball, reviewing it successfully to then be out the next ball.
I think that passage of play of England, of Joe Root getting 5 for 8, and England being like, we're right back in this, and then the inevitability of England being 0 for 2 inside the first over of their
universes
second
were born in the space of minutes. It was a bizarre bizarre thing.
Well, I think that just about wraps up the Test series. So leave us your favourite moment of the Test series in the YouTube comments. And
we had one question, Ross.
Oh, do we?
One question in, and I think we can answer this really quickly. So Chirag Chetwani asks, do you think if India wins the Test series and World Test Championship in England and wins the World Cup in next year, or the next World Test Championship, does that put them on par with Australia in the 90s and the West Indies in the 80s? So we talked on the last show and we said India, or Dan Weston said India are a bit like Nadal in that they're the specialists in one area and they're probably the greatest ever there. If they go to England and win, does that make them the greatest ever, Ross?
I'm not sure I'm not sure if it's just winning in England that does it. I think there's almost a sustained period of just demolishing people. I think they're going to have to go through that next phase as well, just to show actually we are the kings of this. And so not just yet, but they've got some great players in that side. So, and they're all relatively young anyway, other than a couple of them. So,
Max, any thoughts?
I would agree with that. I think it's something that has to be done over a slightly longer period, but they appear to currently have the tools, and with some of the people we can see coming through, also the potential tools to be able to rival that.
Great. I think that is time for a break then.
Absolutely.
You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
I think it was a disgraceful performance, and I think it should never be permitted to happen again.